Hello everyone, in today's video we will set up a different character model using Synty's popular Polygon packs. We'll have a custom Locomotion set and we're going to make sure our new character uses foot IK. In a separate video I've briefly covered how to set up foot IK for custom animations. In this video we will take it a step further and actually set up those custom animations with a brand new character model. In order to create this we will need Unity, Game Creator, and some custom models and animations. So let's dive in. So for the purpose of this tutorial, I set up a really simple scene. So we have a terrain file, increase the height here a bit just to make sure I can demonstrate foot IK. I have a car here for no reason whatsoever, just to show that we're going to use some Synty assets and our default character. Now if you do not have a default player, right click, characters and player, and that's it. So we're not going to use anything else the player has for this. We're just going to swap its model, change animations, locomotion animation, so set up a new locomotion type, and go over some other small things as well. Now once we go to our player, we have a character animator here, which has a drop your 3D model. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to go to my Synty assets. So I have Polygon Sci-Fi City. I don't really think it matters which one you have. So we have fixed scale character. And I'm going to grab our cyborg ninja. Grab him. Cyborg Ninja. There we go. And there he is. Now this is the same with the default character. So we have character controller, which is about this size, which completely explains why they can see you behind cover, for example. You can alter these a bit, make this slightly smaller, reposition it, so like this, for example. 8, 9, yeah, there we go. So it seems to be a slightly better fit. Now it doesn't actually impact anything else. It's not going to create an offset so that he is higher. Now this character by default is going to use the default Locomotion set made by Game Creator. So going to hit play, and we have our default animations. Now you can see he hovers a tiny bit, same with foot IK, slightly above the ground, and yeah, he hovers. Now you need to adjust this in the animations. Maybe you can adjust it somewhere else. Doing it in the animations will work for sure. Now I'm not going to adjust the default animations because we were talking about setting up a different locomotion type. So I'm going to duplicate the existing one. I want to highlight here, Game Creator allows for a lot of different ways to do this. So you can have locomotion states. I'm sure that's a great way to do it, maybe even better than mine. But considering we're going to replace default animations, I'm not really sure why you wouldn't just replace default animations. So I'm going to rename this. Now make sure you do not update the existing one and you actually create a duplicate, because obviously if they would update Game Creator asset, this would be replaced anyway. So just make sure it's a duplicate, and always duplicate things. Make sure you don't mess with the original, because if you mess up you can always just go back. Now I'm going to drag in this one, and yeah, nothing has happened, so we didn't replace any animations, but we're already going to set it. Now for the animations, I don't really have animation packs. I create my own animations. Obviously didn't just want to buy animations for the purpose of this tutorial. So I'll be using my own. Now my own animations are .anim files instead of FBX files. Don't really know why you use FBX, honestly, but I have like a default Mixamo free idle state, so it will just show you where to get those animations if you're using FBX files, which most people are. So I'm going to go to our animator here. So let me open this up, double click, and it will open up the animator. Now make sure base layer is selected, and we need to go to movement, and this will show a whole lot of animations. And when I say a whole lot, I mean a whole lot. So there's a lot here. Idle, while airborne, idle while airborne while moving, grounded, idle, walk, run, etc. So one important thing I want to show you is that you will most likely have to adjust animations. Now, I'm going to show you that Game Creator does this by default anyway. So I'm going to click on idle, and we're going to go to the default idle, character idle here. Now once we open it up, it's a .anim file as well, like mine, and you will see that all of these settings are actually turned on. So root transform, rotation, root transform position. Now these are important not just for things like foot IK, but to actually make sure your animations look halfway decent. I'll show you what happens if you don't do this. It's quite important that this is turned on. It is incredibly important that this is turned off. So Game Creator doesn't support root motion for its characters right now, so you need to make sure that that is actually turned off. What will happen if you turn this on is just a mess. It will, if the animation has root motion support in it anyway. So make sure this is turned off. Now, if you do not see any of this, and I will show you where to find stuff like that with .fbx files. So let me go to animation. So this is a default FBX file. You need to go to the animation tab, and you have the same stats here. So you need to do an additional click to find the animation data. So here it is. If you do not see any of this, it's simply because, well, two possibilities really. The animation is not of the human type, it's actually generic. So when you go to rig, this is humanoid. I actually had to change that because most Mixamo files are not actually humanoid, they're generic, which is messy. There's pros and cons to both. In a way, generic allows for more, but in this case, especially with foot IK, etc., it actually does need to be a humanoid animation. So can be quite messy otherwise. If you don't see this, could be because of that. It could, however, also be because you're using an animation that is actually has root motion baked in. And that won't work. It just won't work. Most character packs that have root motion will hopefully, animation packs that have root motion will hopefully also have a non-root motion version where it's not baked in. So yeah, keep that in mind. Those are the two options if you do not see any of this. So rig is not actually humanoid, it's generic, or root motion is baked in, and well, you can't set these because it already does it by default. So look out for that. If you have that issue, before we continue, grab some different animations, because what I'm going to show you will not work at all. So yeah, let's actually go change something. So we have our character idle. Now the important thing here is when with walking, it uses 2D simple directional, which means it will when you rotate, briefly touch these a bit. It will not touch these. And it won't use walk backwards either. Now, honestly, Game Creator doesn't do it by default, but I don't recall ever seeing a game where, I just can't remember a game where you actually walk backwards in animations. When you turn your controller stick back, you just turn around. So I know most sets will always have these animations in there. Seems to be kind of a default thing. But I don't actually recall ever seeing a game that uses them, and default Game Creator doesn't actually use them either. So, you can go through the trouble of setting all of that up just to have your, everything covered. But yeah, most likely you won't see it, and if your game uses that, then you already know how to set this up anyway. So, because that's quite specific, and you actually had to change a couple of things there. So let's go to our idle first. Going to replace the first file. So I'm going to use my own animations here just to be completely clear. Let me remove this one. Yeah. So I'm going to duplicate this one again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use an idle state that doesn't have foot IK, just to briefly show you how to use that as well. Obviously I have one that does, but I want to show you what it looks like without. So I'm going to drag in this one here. Again, pivot left, pivot right. You can set that up. Default character controller of Game Creator doesn't use it, so I'm not going to set them up because you won't see them. Now we have character walking. I'm going to use walk forward here, walk left forward, and walk right forward. These are with the 2D simple directional. These are not actually touched, so I'm not going to set them up. And again, the backwards, we already discussed that. You won't see them anyway, so I'm not going to set anything up. Here we have run. So where's run? Run forward, left, and right. There we go. Now, yeah, I could set the other ones up. You're not going to see them anyway because 2D simple directional doesn't use them, so I'm not going to set anything up here. But yeah, if you actually walk your controller and actually keep this active, for example, you will see that at some point he will briefly touch these in the spectrum. He will go like this, but never actually touch any of these, and he will briefly touch these. So I will set these up for that 1 millisecond interval where it is actually visible. But I've tried and I haven't been able to activate any of the other animations, so I don't see the point in setting them up, but it's completely up to you, and you can do that. So I didn't correct my animations here, so reason I didn't do that is because I want to show you why it can look off and odd. So now I'm going to run forward and it looks weird. He looks like he looks like he has issues. Let's just say that. He's also hovering above the ground. There's no foot IK obviously, and yeah, it just looks weird. But he's also not running forward. Now, no, I did not set up a wrong animation here. As you can see, briefly he will. Don't know why it's not activating, but anyway, briefly he will touch these two, so that's why they're included. So yeah. Now, important thing, if your animations actually have the head moving, etc., and you're like, why am I not seeing any of that? Why is the idle animation not showing head movements, for example? It's because Game Creator has a lot of things turned on by default. So there's a lot of IK stuff going on here. So smart head IK, foot IK, hand IK, etc. Now if you turn these off, and your animation has head movement by default, so I'm just going to turn this off, for example, and I'm going to play, just keeping it in default in the idle here. You actually see that his head moves a bit. If you turn this on, his head won't move. Now that's because Game Creator actually has actions which uses inverse kinematics to activate his head. So there's pros and cons to both. Yes, your animations might not look as cool as when you bought them if this is turned on, but if this is turned off, there will be features of Game Creator actions based on inverse kinematics that you won't be able to use. So keep that in mind. Whatever you do, I would make sure this is still enabled. I wouldn't disable this. This is just the best feature, honestly, so definitely don't disable this. But yeah, you can, that's completely up to you. Pros and cons to both. You cannot have it both ways. So, pick and choose. That's up to you. Now we're going to fix him looking, not smart while running and walking, and that's because these things were not active. Now, oh no, not 1, 0.1. There we go. Going to make this change for all of them, and let's do all of them. Where's walking? There we go. Now this offset I'm doing is so he doesn't hover above the ground, by the way. Again, that value completely depends on the animation you're using. So, make sure. Now, if your character is actually completely sinking through the ground, most likely he's not of the humanoid type, your animation or your rig or something like that. So if it's generic, most likely that's why you see a character just falling through the ground. And we are using humanoids with Game Creator, so make sure that's set up correctly. Now going to hit play again. No, I didn't set up foot IK, just as a warning. And now when we run, he actually runs forward instead of running backwards. So cool. Now, important thing here is, even though we set up walking animations, you are not seeing any walking animations. He's running. Now, this is because that's basically how Game Creator set that up. By default, your character can run, which means he will run. So that's the same for your playable character as well as other characters, so other AI, enemies, etc. If you've seen any of my videos, you will have noticed that I, by default, will have to turn off can run if I want him to walk while patrolling. That's because by default, they will always be in a running state. Now that's related to Game Creator. That's, not a animation thing, because, as you saw, the default Locomotion, the one we just altered, have running animations. That just has to do with Game Creator. Now, a lot of games will, have the option to, have a manual button for running. If you want to do that, which I did in my own project, just make sure this is disabled by default and have running assigned to a button. I did that in my third person shooter camera video, or whatever I called it. So yeah, I'll put that in the description if you want to know how to do that. But basically that's the reason why we're not running by default. Now, animations will be blended into one of another. So if you have fancy transition files, you can go through the trouble of setting that up. Relatively big chance you will maybe see a frame of that if you're lucky. So keep that in mind, because blending is turned on by default. So quite important to remember that. Now, I am simply going to set up his foot IK for his idle state, you know, if you want to have the same with running and walking, just, you know, repeat those steps. I'm not going to repeat all of those steps because I already have it. Let me make sure this is 0.1. Now, my, you know, previous value of my idle state was 0.07. That's because I was using a different character model, and it, you know, for some reason it seemed to hover a bit less. 0.1 make sure this character model doesn't hover. So again, it's, you know, you have to adjust these basically. So let's adjust these then. So in order to do this, make sure your character is selected. Going to open this up. You will see that I won't be able to change anything. There's no add property option here. Now when I select my character, suddenly I have access to his animated controller and all of his animations. Now just going to adjust this one, you know, go ahead and adjust walking and running, etc. as well. So going to add a property here, Animator, and we're going to add IK left foot and IK right foot. There we go. Where are they? Oh, here they are. So you need to go to curves. That's the important thing here. Make sure you have that. And we're going to select 1 and 1. Now this curve might look slightly different on your screen. It might actually be a big drop or, you know, something like that. You just need to make sure that the first key is on 1 and the last key is also on 1. And do that for both. If you do not do this, he will sink to the ground during his idle animation, during his running, walking, etc. Cool. Now we've done that. If you are using FBX files, slightly different. So you will go to your, you know, basically the same process, but in the animation you will have to go to animation tab and set up the curves here. Now the way you do this is literally just, you know, add a curve and use these two names. I'm going to remove this one. This is the important part, so these names have to be used. So I give left foot, like spelled like this. Capital letters are important as well, keep that in mind. Then you open up the curve and do the same thing. So first key 1, second key 1. So slightly different for FBX files, but yeah, that's it. So I'll hit play, and you know, as you can see, this is my own idle state. Now he's briefly walking, and you can see that foot IK is working. So, you know, all great, yay. I didn't adjust the walking, that's why we're still going through the ground there for a moment. But yeah, now again, you know, important to, you know, keep in mind, yes, he might hover slightly still, related to a couple of things here. Again, animation, something you can adjust. I had a value of 1, make it 0.9, you know, and see what happens basically. You know, you have to mess with those values a bit, try it out, play around with it. 1 by default has this effect. Then there's also another thing to keep in mind, which is basically, you know, terrain is not perfect. So as you can see, this is how much it hovers here, and at another point it will hover. Well, this one doesn't hover at all, and this one doesn't hover at all either. So, you know, that's the thing as well. You know, how well is your terrain made? You know, those are important things as well. So it's not just game creator, it's not just animations, it's terrain as well. So please keep that in mind. So yeah, that's it. You know, we're using our own character here. really nice. We're using our own animations. Now, no, I know I didn't go through the trouble of setting them all up, but you get the point, you know, just replace the files with your own. That's really it. Make sure you create duplicates of everything, and yeah, you know, set up FootIK for the default animations, but also for running and walking. Now, you don't have to do that for jumping, for example, because the moment he lands, he will just use the idle animation anyway. So, you know, those are the small things you can think about. You might have to do it for rolling if you have rolling animations, etc. So yeah. But yeah, really cool stuff. You know, a couple of important things to keep in mind. Now, I know some people had issue with, you know, Synty characters not working properly. I just dragged this one in and it worked. So it might also be asset related. They might not be humanoid. They might be generic rigs. I'm not really sure what the issue was. For me, it really was a simple drag and drop. But yeah, again, this might completely depend on the asset. I know my Synty pack is relatively new. I don't think it's an old one. The sci-fi pack, so maybe, you know, they just, you know, did a better job. I'm not really sure. But yeah, you know, keep that in mind. And yes, some models will be different. I, for example, had a PBR character soldier, but he was completely generic. He wasn't a humanoid, wasn't of the humanoid type, you know, so that created a small mess. So yeah, those are a couple of things to keep in mind. So yeah, that's it really. Hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please hit like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.